They said he ruled by divine right, but behind the palace walls the king crawled on all fours, commanding his servants to bark like beasts. And they obeyed. There's a kind of madness that doesn't shout. It whispers through bloodlines, drips from gold-plated ceilings, hides behind velvet thrones. And in the heart of Europe, that madness wore a crown. You've heard of cruel kings, you've heard of tyrants, but what if I told you that one of the most powerful monarchs in history made obedience a ritual of humiliation? That he didn't just rule by fear, but by breaking the minds of those around him, making men into animals, stripping away dignity, rewriting reality itself. He didn't want servants. He wanted subjects to devolve, and he made them believe that barking like dogs was loyalty, that crawling naked was duty, that submission was sacred. This wasn't a joke. It wasn't performance. This was a systematic, calculated form of control. The castle halls echoed with human howls, knees bloodied from stone floors, eyes vacant from years of degradation. He rewired the hierarchy, not by law, not by coin, but by psychological collapse. His name was Charles VI, the Mad King of France. But don't mistake madness for weakness, because this man ruled an empire while slipping into delusion. And that paradox of power and psychosis was not accidental. It was designed, cultivated, and protected by the same institutions that claimed to guard the people. Let that sink in. This was not just a story of a mentally ill king. It was the story of how entire kingdoms bend themselves around insanity when it comes with a royal seal. A nation of priests, nobles, and bureaucrats enabled his unraveling, because his madness gave them cover, his delusion gave them power. And the deeper you go, the more you'll see that this wasn't about one man. It was about the system that builds cages inside your mind and calls them crowns. A system that still exists, just with better PR. Because Charles didn't start out this way. He was young, vibrant, a symbol of French rebirth. But as you'll see, his transformation was no accident. It was slow, intentional, and the signs were ignored, because madness, when wrapped in royal robes, becomes holy, sacred, even strategic. We're not just diving into medieval psychosis, we're dissecting how psychological control is weaponized by the elite, then and now, how institutions manufacture obedience through spectacle, and how you've been taught to kneel without realizing it. If you're feeling something in your gut right now, that's your instincts waking up. Don't turn away, because by the end of this you won't look at any seat of power the same way again. And if you think this is just ancient history, let me remind you, ritualized humiliation didn't die with kings. It just got rebranded. Charles VI didn't begin as a monster. He began as a miracle. Born in 1368, Charles was a golden child, the hope of France during one of its darkest hours. Crowned at just 11 years old, he became king in name while a council of uncles ruled in his place. And like all good pawns, he was groomed in luxury and isolation, taught obedience, not wisdom, ceremony, not truth. He was loved as a symbol, but ignored as a soul. By his early 20s, Charles broke free of his regents and took full control, and for a moment, France flourished. He slashed taxes, he removed corrupt officials, the people loved him. But the crown is not a gift, it's a curse in disguise, and it didn't take long for the cracks to show. In 1392, something broke. Riding through a forest in pursuit of a would-be assassin, Charles suddenly turned his sword on his own men. He slaughtered 4 knights before collapsing in the dirt, eyes wide, mouth frothing, whispering the name of demons only he could see. It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't stress. It was a fracture in the mind, and it never healed. From that day on, Charles VI was never truly himself. The episodes returned, violent, unpredictable, terrifying. But what made this case different from simple madness was how the court responded. They didn't isolate him. They didn't dethrone him. They adapted to him. Because when a king believes he's made of glass, you don't break the illusion, you reinforce it. During one infamous episode, Charles demanded that his robes be stitched without seams, so no thread could cut his glass skin, and so they obeyed. When he forgot his own name, his own wife, or the existence of France itself, they built entire rituals to help him remember. Every day, priests would chant his name like a god. Courtiers bowed before a man who didn't even recognize them. Reality was rewritten in service of his delusion. But the worst was yet to come. During his deepest episodes, Charles believed he was surrounded by animals. He saw dogs, pigs, wolves, and he became obsessed with dominance. He would scream commands, crawling on all fours, demanding his servants do the same. And they did. They barked, growled, groveled, licked his boots. Some were stripped naked, made to act as pets for hours, sometimes days. You might ask, why didn't they stop him? Because obedience to madness was safer than rebellion against power. Because when a king descends into animalism and still wields divine authority, the people closest to him must either join the illusion or be destroyed by it. What we're witnessing here isn't just personal madness. It's systemic surrender, a palace so afraid of truth that it armored itself in ritualized delusion. The king barks, the court bows, and the people? They learn to normalize insanity because it's dressed in gold. Do you see it now? This isn't just history. This is a mirror. They called him Charles the Beloved. Then they called him Charles the Mad. But the truth was always more disturbing, Charles the Weapon. Because while the king barked and crawled, others ruled in his name. Behind the madness was a court of vultures, uncles, dukes, bishops, who fed off his unraveling like parasites. Each episode of insanity was another opportunity to seize land, push laws, or eliminate rivals under the cover of royal decree. You see, the king's madness wasn't a problem for the powerful. It was a solution. His delusions created a vacuum, and in that vacuum, the true rulers emerged. France became a kingdom ruled by shadows. The Duke of Burgundy, the Duke of Orleans, the Queen herself, each built their own factions, using the king's breakdown as justification for their rise. Assassinations followed, civil war ignited. Not because Charles lost his mind, but because those around him weaponized it. This was no longer a man losing control. It was a machine, reprogramming reality in front of the people, and the people obeyed. Here's the part no one teaches. Charles believed he was being hunted by phantoms. He insisted that dark forces whispered in his sleep. He swore that courtiers were plotting to replace him with a goat-headed imposter who would sit on the throne and bleed the kingdom dry. Crazy, right? Except they were plotting, they were whispering, and they were bleeding the kingdom. His delusions mirrored truth, not perfectly, but close enough that it should terrify you. Because madness is often just a mind unchained, seeing the rot beneath the marble. And those who wanted power? They made sure Charles kept seeing phantoms. They brought in physicians to pump him with poisons labeled as cures. They surrounded him with yes-men trained to repeat his hallucinations back to him with smiles. They built rituals around his episodes so that his business became religion. This was ritualized psychosis. A man becomes unhinged, and instead of healing him, they build a temple to his breakdown. You think that only happened in the 1400s? Look around. Entire nations today are held together by narratives that make no sense, economies built on fiction, leaders who hallucinate their own greatness while the people bark for scraps. The rituals changed, but the structure remains. Which brings us to you. You're not watching this because it's just history. You're here because some part of you feels it. The lie, the illusion, the game. So here's your identity phrase. Type it twice in the comments to mark your descent into truth. They crown the broken and burn the wise. They crown the broken and burn the wise. Say it to remember. Say it to awaken. Because what comes next will show you how madness doesn't just survive, it rules. There is a point in every empire's life where lies become sacred and truth becomes treason. By the early 1400s, France had reached that point, and Charles VI, the Mad King, wasn't just tolerated, he was needed, because he absorbed the madness of the nation. He wore it like a crown of glass, so no one else had to face the fracture beneath their feet. His body decayed, his mind twisted, and the court began whispering another name behind locked doors, Le Roi Mort Vivant, the dead living king. Charles would go months without recognizing his own family, calling his children impostors, accusing his wife of sorcery. He would strip naked in the snow and demand absolution from invisible cardinals. He insisted entire rooms be emptied of furniture because he believed demons hid inside chairs. And they listened. The throne room was stripped. Courtiers bowed to the empty air beside him. Every delusion was met with ritual. Every break was met with submission. Because they didn't fear madness. They feared what happened if he ever woke up. You see, the truth wasn't just buried. It was dangerous. Charles was no longer just a man. He was a living altar, an icon the state used to control perception. As long as he was the king, the system stayed intact. As long as people feared him, they didn't question the ones pulling his strings. So they made the insane sacred. His madness became law. His violence became policy. His collapse became culture. And the people, they learned to mimic the behavior. Peasants began repeating the king's phrases as blessings. Towns named dogs after him. Artists painted him with halos. The deeper his madness went, the higher the devotion climbed. This is institutional mind control in its purest form. Make madness divine, and obedience becomes survival. What began in one man's mind became the architecture of a kingdom, and it didn't stop at the palace gates. Records from the time show rising cases of mimicry syndrome, peasants who believed they too were made of glass, soldiers who barked in the night, believing they were royal hounds, priests who cut their own skin in acts of holy imitation. Madness spread, not as disease, but as doctrine. Because when power models insanity, the people follow out of fear or worship. Now ask yourself, what behaviors have you accepted because authority normalized them? What thoughts have you silenced because everyone else believes something you know isn't right? That's how it starts. The line between order and delusion isn't guarded by facts, it's guarded by courage. The courage to see what's in front of you and call it what it is. And in a world where barking like a dog was once loyalty, maybe your silence is the leash. History tells us Charles VI died quietly in 1422, but empires never bury their madness, they pass it on. His death was not an end, it was a transfer from one body to a system, from a man to a machine, from visible insanity to institutional doctrine. They locked away the stories, buried the records, canonized his name, not because they were ashamed, but because they had perfected the method. The royal model became the blueprint for modern rule. Break the mind, rebuild the belief, control the body, reward obedience. You think this was just one broken king? No, Charles was only the beginning. The lesson they learned was this: the more you humiliate a man, the more he needs the system that broke him. And that's how you rule. You don't need chains, you don't need armies. You just need to convince a man to crawl willingly, to call his leash a crown. That's what Charles did to his court. That's what the court did to the people. And that's what your modern world does to you. Watch closely. You're told to work yourself to death and thank your employer for the opportunity. You're bombarded with lies 24/7, but shamed if you question the script. You're surrounded by noise, yet starving for truth, and punished if you seek it. That's not freedom. That's refined madness. Glass kings still rule. They just wear suits now. But here's the secret they never wanted you to hear. Madness, when recognized, becomes a compass. It shows you where the rot lives. It shows you where the empire cracks. It shows you the gate. And now, you're standing at it. You've walked through the ritual, heard the truths, seen the mask slide off. So what happens next isn't about Charles VI, it's about you. Will you crawl? Will you bark? Or will you stand, look the illusion in the eye, and say, "They crown the broken and burn the wise"? Say it again, out loud this time. Let it leave you, a throat like a spell. They crown the broken and burn the wise. Because only those who speak forbidden truths become immune to them. And now you know. The leash was always in your hand, not around your neck. If this opened something inside you, subscribe. We're just getting started. There are more kings, more rituals, more lies. But now, you see them. And that means you're dangerous. Welcome to the descent. Welcome to the